Thursday, March 4, 2020. This is a special meeting of the Steering Committee of the Vermont Climate Council. This is a special meeting because it's being held on a date and time outside of our regular meeting schedule. And our regular meeting schedule, I believe, is currently every other Monday morning, I think at 10 a.m. But we are going to, one of the main purposes for today's meeting is to adopt a new regular meeting, which is on the agenda. So I want to thank the Steering Council members for making the time to meet today. I can review the agenda briefly. We have minutes from the Monday meeting to review and approve. If everybody's had time, we can always put that off if folks have not had time to review the minutes. We would like to review the progress on finalizing subcommittees. We made a lot of progress on Monday and see if there's any more to report. And then I felt it was necessary to cover some governance matters relating to open meetings and training on governance issues for new subcommittee members, much as we had as a council when we started out. And finally, how the steering committee would like to handle any future requests to testify at the legislature should they be extended at the latter half of the session. And as we all know, we're in town meeting week, but the legislature will be back next week. And Julie and I, we're hoping to get some consensus from the committee as to who should appear before legislative committees if requested in the last half of the session. So first off, we could start with the minutes. Have steering committee members had an opportunity to review those minutes, and if so, are you comfortable moving those to approval? And I'll just give folks time. It's okay if you haven't seen them. Things are moving very quickly this week with subcommittees and all that. So you get a bye, and we can postpone them with consensus for the next meeting if you'd like. So what's your druther?
I've not seen them. I may have just missed them if there's, okay. But I can scan them real quick if we want to move it later to the agenda, maybe.
I was looking for them in the agenda, but I don't think they're linked. I haven't
They're on the website.
Yeah, I think because there was such a tight time frame between these two meetings, they got posted within the statutory time frame, but probably with not enough time for folks to look at them. So if you want to move them to the next steering committee meeting, we can easily do that if there's consensus on that. I don't want to rush it.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. So the next agenda item is the establishment of a new regular meeting date. The open meeting law does require, the establishment of regular meetings for a public body at a predictable date and time as much as possible. And as I mentioned earlier, the regular meetings every other Monday. That time no longer meets the schedule of all steering committee members. And so Jane has reached out to all of us to determine what is the best alternative date and time. So Jane, if you want to fill us in on what you discovered.
There feels like there has been consensus around Thursday, starting on Thursday the 18th, every other week from that forward at 2 o'clock. So, and I waited on this steering committee meeting just to make sure there was consensus, in fact, on that. And then I'm happy this afternoon to get those all on your calendar. Chris, do you have a comment on that? Hope you're muted.
Just so you know, that also is when the regular State Emergency Operations Center's meeting is held for the towns and RPCs and others. Typically, I don't need to be on those calls, but if something big happens, I may need to be on the SEOC call. So just FYI.
Yeah,
okay.
Appreciate that. Appreciate your work on that as well. We've been having a lot of those calls on the state level lately. So, thank you, Chris.
Yep.
So are you good with keeping this as the regular meeting, and we'll understand if you get called away and we can.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to explain if I was absent from time, but I'll give you a heads up beforehand.
We could always try to accommodate your schedule as well.
I just, just to put it out there, Chris, it was, I think you were the one with Wednesday didn't work, but if there was some switch from Thursday to Wednesday in April, or if I'm happy to accommodate if that doesn't become too burdensome or something.
We're good as long as we're not having a flood on top of the pandemic or something. We're all right.
Oh, geez. Banish the thought.
It's almost spring, Chris. It's almost spring.
There's a lot of snow too.
Hope springs eternal.
Okay, so I think we have consensus that we will change the regular meeting date to every other Thursday at 2 o'clock, starting on Thursday, March 18th. Perfect. The next agenda item is any update on subcommittee membership that may have occurred since the Monday meeting. Jane?
I'm happy. Yeah, happy. Let me just share the screen that we looked at the other day. I can, this will be attached with the minutes as a resource for the public to review after also. But this is, we've moved folks from red to yellow and green to yellow. And so this is the most final list I have as of now. Largely, I think we're waiting on final answers for a few for the Ag and Ecosystems Committee that we expect to have by the end of this week. One for the Science and Data Committee, Lisa Ryan, who my expectation from the co-chairs there was that Secretary Moore has been doing some personal outreach with her.
Yes, she's let us know she doesn't have the capacity to serve.
Okay, well, we can move her off then. And then there were two asks out to Donald Campbell and Mindy Blank on the rural resilience and adaptation. And they would be great additions, and they were taking the week to think through their capacity. And so I believe they're joining the meeting tomorrow afternoon, and we'll provide an answer at that point. And then finally, the cross sector is the only one. Also, there were two asks representing a Building Green Institute, two representatives there, of which there's been some back and forth there. And I expect by this week that they'll nail down which person will serve with respect to the cross sector mitigation. So we're close, but not quite final yet.
And I may be speaking out of turn, but when I spoke with Rich briefly, Rich Cowart, about cross-sector mitigation in preparation for today's meeting, it sounded as though, based on that, and you may have more up-to-date information, Jane, but it sounded like Nadav was worried that he would not have the time, and that Candace had interest in a different committee, and that her kind of skill sets and experience may not have been as aligned with cross-sector mitigation as a different one. So it's not entirely clear to me that we would have one of them join. It feels like it's still up in the air whether it would be one or the other or neither.
Yeah, the interest from Candace was recognizing that she was nominated with respect to her role with Building Green, but she had also nominated herself because of her affiliation with a different organization, and as such thought she'd be better suited on rural resilience, and they no longer feel like they need her service, but didn't want to close the door completely until they heard from Donald Campbell and Mindy Blank. So I expect that Candace is interested in serving on cross sector, wearing her Building Green hat, if the door is closed on rural resilience. So again, a few things up in the air, and perhaps I have that wrong, but I think that she would like to serve on cross sector if needed, if the other one is not an opportunity. And I'll just say what hasn't been updated here, but I will say that as we present this as a more final document, staff and co-chairs in particular have been working within their organizations to staff up the subcommittees, and in particular the resilience and adaptation one, which a number of the state staff originally tapped with serving this subcommittee who had bowed out because of capacity. They've actually added 3 additional state staffers here and are feeling like they have sufficient state capacity now to help them with their work. And so that is not reflected in this document yet, but as we finalize it, I'll make sure I get all the state names on this chart as well.
Perfect. Any other, Lauren, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. Well, without seeing it, I can remember Ben Nation for Ag and Ecosystem said he'd get back to me before our meeting tomorrow afternoon, so we should know on him. And I know that one of our co-chairs is trying to meet with both Olivia Pena and Judy Dow to suss out some interest. I know Judy was originally tapped in Just Transitions, but I think that might have just been because they met first last week before Ag and Ecosystems had the chance to. So ongoing conversations with her and which subcommittee she'll be sitting on, if any. And then I did just want to flag, because we did get an email from Councilmember Klein earlier today to the steering committee, her interest in being the liaison from Just Transitions, and we talked about liaisons on Monday very briefly with the steering committee, and that I believe the Agriculture and Ecosystem Subcommittee will be talking about it tomorrow as well. So a few names still up in the air.
Two points to that quickly, Lauren, is one with respect to Judy Dow that came in while I was in the cross-sector mitigation meeting now, and she has actually accepted and will be at the Ag and Ecosystems meeting tomorrow. Just hadn't updated it yet, but that just came in. And then second, we did at the cross-sector mitigation meeting, and Jared and Liz can speak to this too, spoke about liaisons with that group and suggested that in addition to the science and data and Just Transition liaisons, that an Ag and Ecosystems liaison made a lot of sense. And I suggested, perhaps if I had heard right, that you were somewhat interested in that role and would be talking about it tomorrow with the Ag and Ecosystems subcommittee. But I believe cross-sector saw that as valuable and recognized that would be a great to have that permanent connection on an ongoing basis with the Ag and Ecosystems subcommittee. That's it for me. Oh, Jared's talking, sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. So just process-wise, would it be helpful if we just pause now to formally approve the folks who have said yes, that have turned from green to yellow, and then deal with anybody else that we're still figuring out later? And it does seem to me that in terms of the knowledge of who that would be, I do think we could add Kelly to that list as the cross-sector mitigation as a subcommittee member of that subcommittee as well, given that the way that I heard it from her is that the Just Transition subcommittee has already met and identified her as the one that they would want as the liaison, and cross-sector mitigation already said we want a liaison and a subcommittee member there. So I think we could go ahead and approve Kelly as we do with Judy or anybody else who's said yes.
So Jane, you're going to have to refresh my memory, or Julie or any other member of the steering committee from Monday. I thought we had done some sort of a pre-approval once individuals said yes, that they would be approved. Are all of these folks in that category? If, number one, confirm that was indeed what we decided, and two, is there any need to take any further consensus action today?
What I'm hearing from Jared is a recognition that at this point we're approving the additional members who have turned from green to yellow.
Yeah.
And in addition to what I reflected on the sheet that was just shown, we're also going to take action on Kelly Klein joining the cross-sector mitigation as a member, as well as Judy Dow, who's currently shown as green, but has in fact said yes. So just as an addition to the sheet. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we have any conversation folks want to have on that, whether we are ready to agree to all of these as members of the subcommittees and the liaison. Okay. Is everybody good with that? So
I think we're ready.
Okay. All right. So I mean, I guess hearing no objections, are we all good with moving this roster of subcommittee members forward?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So looks like we're all in agreement that we have more subcommittee members, which is a really good, I think, segue, if you're done, Jane, into the next topics, because you know, I want to preface the next few items, you know, with a bit of a table setting. I had in my mind that the formation of the committees, which is really exciting work that has been accomplished this week, and the fact that some work I think has actually begun is really very encouraging. One of the items I had hoped that we would bring up at a next steering committee meeting immediately after all the appointments were approved is the best way to stand up these subcommittees with respect to training and orientation, much like was provided to the full council back in December and January. And now, just looking, I'm not going to ask you to put it up, but I did a quick, count on the screen, and we probably have up to 30 subcommittee members, in addition to the 23 council members. So we have, I feel, as a steering committee, if it's our mission and our goal to support the subcommittees in the work, that we should talk about how we best stand this up to avoid future problems and future distractions from the work, and to support the work and the members of these subcommittees who have now entered the realm of being a public body and a subcommittee. We've learned from the Attorney General's office, does have to comply with, the open meeting laws. And then for all of us, we have the public records laws. So this is really in no way intended to be any criticism of anything, except to say that I think we owe it to them and would like to have that conversation. It's kind of accelerated in my mind because I think we're on a bit of an accelerated schedule with the subcommittee work. Jared?
Thank you, Secretary Young, for identifying that. I think I agree that that's important. Maybe others are already a step or two ahead of me, but it strikes me that given that half or so of most of the subcommittee members would have already gone through that orientation, I wondered, just from an efficiency standpoint, if it would be possible to schedule kind of just one orientation that would be for any new subcommittee members, regardless of which subcommittee they're joining. I know that could be difficult to schedule, but I think it would probably make more sense for the training to be for all new subcommittee members rather than an orientation by subcommittee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can certainly talk about the mechanics of it. And that's like, let me just tee up the next agenda item, which I just wanted to lay out there as one of the impetus too for accelerating this. And then we can go to the next agenda item, which talks about how we're going to do the training, and everybody agrees we should do something. And I did want to just put out there that one of the things that caused me some concern around the open meeting laws was the invitation from a legislative caucus, to respond to a survey, and all council members received that invitation, and that was great. Really glad that they're interested in the work and how it's going, and looking to help us in any way they can to get this work done. But at the same time, it raised some questions in my mind, and as to how does this fit in to the construct in which we all have to work. So General Counsel Matt Chapman is here, and not so much to critique that invitation, but I think really to just pose some issues around that invitation, and then I think it's a teachable educational moment for everybody as they receive emails and requests to speak or requests to engage in a conversation about the work of the body when there's more than a quorum present is an important it's an important concept that all of us could need to make sure that we're keeping in mind as we do our work. And remaining sensitive to our desire and obligations to stay in good communication and contact with legislators. So, Matt, I didn't know if you had anything in particular that you wanted to tee up at this point in time. You're on the agenda now, or?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy if there's anything particular, Secretary Young, you'd like to sort of direct me towards. I mean, I did have a chance to both look at the invitation and the underlying survey, and I think that, the way that it was constructed, and because it's coming sort of from a third party to members of the council without a quorum ever necessarily being present for business that's not related to council business, but rather to legislative business, I think that particular communication doesn't trigger the open meetings law. But I think you're correct in that it's a good reminder that if council members were performing the function, or that other sorts of situations. I guess the only other thing that I would note with respect to that particular item is it stated in there that information would not be public and so forth? It's clearly subject to the Public Records Act. So any of the information associated that any council member provides to the legislature is subject to the Public Records Act as a part of that process. So I guess those are the two sort of observations I had, and I had the chance to just speak briefly with Ledge Council, and they concur with the Public Records Act related issue. So,
okay. Thank you very much, Matt. Does anyone have any? Liz, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, I think Matt just hit it. So thank you, Matt. That was helpful. When I got it, it didn't dawn on me that there might be an open meeting law problem, I'll admit. I think it was sent individually, so that might have been why. Plus, everybody needs a refresher, including me. But I did think about the public records part of it, and, should have probably done more in thinking about that in terms of the fact it was a Survey Monkey, not thinking about how you can't necessarily retrieve it, right? So and maybe this gets to what Secretary Young wanted to kind of just get our feedback on, but when it comes to the training and the fact we have so many new folks, plus are now further into this work than we were when we heard your presentation in December, maybe the answer is maybe it's a two-step approach where we ask the new folks to actually go back and review, like very specifically give them that part of the presentation video link so that it's easy with the material, and then have a full group, like a much more targeted kind of refresher, because I think people will have probably better questions now too, because they'll have gone through a couple months and had their own experience with emails coming to them, or, conversations and meetings getting planned and all of that. So I'll just put that out there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I agree with Liz's approach. The open meeting law piece of this, it didn't concern me. The public records piece, I assumed that it would be good to kind of have clarity, on. I actually don't know what the obligations are of the legislature to disclose anything that they ask of anyone, but I was treating this as like a survey from anybody, like even if a graduate student at UVM wanted to do a survey of all council members, that wouldn't strike me as an open meeting issue. What that would get to as far as public records law, I don't know. But Liz's approach to the training, I think, makes a lot of sense. Highlight that segment of that first meeting where we had the training. And Liz, the only concern I had, I think it'd be great if we could all meet together, including all the subcommittee members, but that might be tough. Would maybe an approach be written questions and a FAQ, and then also have a meeting for as many people as available? I just wonder if that might be more efficient. But then we also have a written record that people can go back and look at with the FAQ about open meeting law and public records law as applies to the council.
Julie?
I think having a question and answer session is probably really helpful at the point we're at in the process. I would offer, I guess, Chris, that I feel like the documents from the Secretary of State's office and the AGO related to open meeting law that Matt had shared, I think at our last council meeting, although it may have been 2 ago now, they sort of all run together. Are sort of the go-to reference. And I guess I'm a little concerned about reinventing the wheel, and I don't necessarily want to interpret the fairly direct and robust guidance that's available already from the AG and the Secretary of State. Is my only thought on the FAQ component, and I'm not sure there's things that are specific to the council that wouldn't come up in sort of those more general format.
Lauren?
Yeah, this is a very half-baked thought, so bear with me, but trying to blend a couple of these ideas. I wonder if sending the link, and this is the beauty in everything being videotaped and recorded now, sending the link to that December meeting and making sure new subcommittee members watch it, along with links to those forms from the Secretary of State and Administration Office. And then each individual subcommittee makes space, like a 10 to 15 minute direct Q&A where maybe Matt or somebody else from council can come to each of those and answer questions based on feedback that they have or questions they have based on those forms in that meeting. And that could be really beneficial. Liz, to your point, I can continue to use some lessons and guidance here. So that might be easier too, because those are already standing meetings and a way to kind of approach this as a subcommittee scale.
Okay. Any other thoughts on, I guess we've moved into, we all agree, additional training, refreshers for those of us. I mean, I had the exact same thought, Liz, was back when we first had these presentations, it was almost academic, right, and conceptual, but now that we've driven deep into the work and we see, you know, what it's going to entail to kind of stay within these guardrails, it just makes it all the more real. And I think the two main things will be understanding, like I've said time and again, you know, if it's not a public meeting, you can rest assured it's likely a public record. And that public meetings are more than just our meetings here, but can be implicated depending on how we use our email communications. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for all of us is working within the emails. So, okay, we all agree we should do the training. There's an idea on the table to take the training that we've already done and not reinvent the wheel. And what I recall we have is in the open governance trainings, we had a presentation from the Attorney General's Office on the Public Records Act. We had a presentation from the Attorney General's Office on the open meeting law that they provided PowerPoints, which are still available as well. And that we had a presentation from Larry Nobbins from the Ethics Commission on ethics, the Ethics Commission and its job. And so there are three, and they probably total, maybe an hour and a half, maybe two. So I think what I heard you suggest, Lauren, is that we somehow communicate with every new council and every new committee member. And I think we have one new council member who didn't go through the work through that session. Send them a link to that particular meeting or those meetings. Send them the PowerPoints. Send them the Secretary of State's office guidance that we were referred to by, I believe, Matt early on, and implement some sort of a requirement that they take their own time to review them, and then that you will either make space at a subcommittee meeting to discuss it or a broader council meeting. That's the part I'm not clear on.
I recommended subcommittee just because smaller group, more questions can be asked more quickly and they'd be more relevant to what we'd be individually speaking about.
Okay. And Chris, did you have more to add?
Yeah, just to add to what Lauren said, and that would also, and I'll put this in chat too, that would negate the need for subcommittee members to make room for another meeting, like the council as a whole or something.
Yeah.
One thing I would note though, in whatever we communicate to the subcommittee members or everybody else, in that the PowerPoints that are provided on those topics are not a substitute for actually watching the discussion, because the PowerPoints, they provide good structure and a good point of reference, but they're not complete in and of themselves. So just in case folk are thinking, I'll take a shortcut and just look at the PowerPoints, it's not going to be deep enough for them.
Okay, that's a good point. I agree. Anyone have concerns with that, requiring folks to look at the whole meeting? I don't remember if it was, span 2 meetings or not, but we can certainly tee up the right point on the videos that are already posted for folks. I guess I would love some clarity on how you think this should be implemented. Should it be Jane sending out something on behalf of the steering committee to the subcommittee co-chairs or to the entire council and committee members saying that this training is available, here's where you would find it, and the steering committee in support of the subcommittees has determined that it's required watching for all new council and subcommittee members. Thoughts?
I can just one comment. I'm finding that not in communication with co-chairs only, there needs to be some directive that things that are shared with co-chairs are then shared with subcommittees. And I ask that, I'm sort of asking that partially because I think that what I'm hearing is the best communication from me is to go to co-chairs. But then my expectation on a recent issue with a subcommittee was that they were going to then share that with their subcommittee, and it was never done. Yeah. And so I guess that's a question, like, should I just, if we're requiring this of all subcommittees, should it just go right to all of the subcommittee membership?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Matt, do you see any concerns in the open meeting law, public, the email notification that this is going to be a requirement?
Yeah, I don't. I think, it's probably worth just noting. It's sort of I've been thinking about Jane's role in the process, and I think that, when Jane is providing, say, detailed agendas or supplemental materials to committee or subcommittee members to help facilitate their duties, I think she kind of plays the same role as, like, again, analyzing back to a municipality, like a city manager giving the city council materials, right? She's facilitating the deliberation that's going to take place, but she's not a voting member or deliberating herself. So I think she's a good fulcrum for a lot of this material to go out.
Yeah, I was just going to offer that my preference, if others agree, would just be for every council and every subcommittee member to get it directly from Jane, so that there isn't a possibility of missed kind of, connection, and just so that everyone else who may have already gone through the training is aware that we're requesting that of new council and new subcommittee members as well, and the opportunity to review it themselves if they so please.
Okay. How do we,
sorry.
Do we want, I'm just wondering about the co-chairs of the subcommittees. Do we want them to reinforce this with at their next subcommittee meetings? Because I feel like the sooner the better, that folks know this is out there and it really is important training to inform work moving forward. Lauren?
Yeah, looking at the calendar, I wonder if we might just recommend that if subcommittees are going to be theoretically formed in full by the end of this week or over the week's end, that we could say with their next 2 weeks worth of meetings, because I think each subcommittee is meeting at least once a week already, that they add this to their agenda and require that it happen before the March 22nd full council meeting.
Okay.
And then just hope that Matt and his team have time to come to each of our subcommittee meetings for a handful of minutes.
How does that sound to everybody, Liz?
I think that sounds good. And I think that the steering committee members, we ourselves could make sure at those subcommittee meetings that we represent the importance of this. I think you're right. This is like, it's timely, to do this now. So we can take that back as an important item.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on that topic? Jane, are you feeling like you've got all the direction you need?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. The next item is again another open government consideration, and it's actually I skipped. I'm sorry. It's legislative communications, and should there be any requests for testimony once they come back from town meeting break. Secretary Moore, did get a request to come over really early in the session just to give an update, and I know that she went in and championed getting us some resources, which the governor signed off on the budget adjustment bill on Monday. So that's the done deal. We're going to get the resources to support the contracts that you are pursuing. But that was kind of ministerial, and here we are in our formation. But acknowledging that there's legislative interest in the work that we're doing and how we're doing. I guess I put out there how, if we do get requests for testimony on behalf of the Vermont Climate Council, we would want to handle those. Because again, it's like with a board, normally if you're going to, I guess, if we're being asked to take a position on something, that's very different than going and giving them an update as to how we're doing. So maybe starting with updates on how we're doing, I would think it would befall to members of the steering committee, but I open that up for conversation. And then would it be one member, or should we continue with the how we've formed ourselves with, should it be one House and one Senate and one administrative member appearing in front of the committee for testimony should we ever get called to give them updates? So that's the question that Julie and I were sort of noodling on, and I mentioned it to Liz the other day as well. So, they may not ask, but it would be great to be prepared. So that's really more for the non-controversial. How are you doing? How can we help? I guess questions. I don't know, Chris.
You thinking so? If I am asked to testify in my role as a council member, but wearing my Wyndham Regional Commission hat or wearing my representative of all things municipal hat, I mean, that would be, I wouldn't need any clearance or anything for like that, would I? Because they're asking me in the capacity in which I serve, and I'm not expecting to be asked. I'm just throwing. I mean, you use anybody else. Use anybody in their position, but I would assume that if you're being asked as an individual to represent your own individual perspective and not speaking on behalf of the council, just your perspective in whatever role you've been asked to play and not speaking on behalf of the council, I mean, that would be just kind of normal course of business, wouldn't it?
Julie?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think there's probably a lot of parallels to state employees offering testimony, and just need to be very clear at the outset of whatever testimony they're providing, in what capacity they're offering that testimony, whether it's as a person or on behalf of either the organization or, in this case, the council. But I think, I guess, so there's that piece, but then there is this larger, I've gone in and given a presentation, as Suzanne indicated, about the report that we delivered, just the highlights from the report, and the budget adjustment request. And obviously those were fairly factual and straightforward. But to the extent there are requests for testimony about the work of the council specifically, going forward, how we would want to approach those, whether it would be someone on behalf of the council or a team of 3 or all 6 of us potentially. But I think thinking about that will be important, because I expect there may be additional requests for testimony before the end of the legislative session.
Jared?
Yeah, making sure I'm not muted. I guess I think of 3 things in relation to this. One, I think at a minimum in the kind of ethos we developed around the steering committee being in service to the council, that it would be good for any requests that come in or anything that gets scheduled to let the council know that it's happening, which I think already happened, but just to reiterate that, so that anytime that whoever it is in front of a committee testifying with regard to the work of the council, that other councilors know about that and would have the opportunity to kind of join if they wanted, since those are public. think as you were suggesting, Secretary Young, that it partially depends on what the nature of the request is. If it's kind of an update on the work done and kind of just sharing information from our, the like decisions and actions that are captured in our minutes, then, I could see that being, one person that we identify, or kind of one each might be a good approach. If it's more about a position or a question about policy or where the council's going or where it will end up, I really feel like unless, and this is probably obvious, but unless we've formally agreed to something already as a council, that all any of us could do is represent ourselves as a councilor, but not speak on behalf of the whole council. And I think that's obvious, but it's probably worth saying. So those are kind of three immediate thoughts I have.
Julie?
I wonder if, along the lines, Jared, of what you've just outlined, whether, there's value in having, for example, Jane or I speak on behalf of the council, not in terms of substance, but in terms of providing these updates, but would prepare written testimony ahead of making any such remarks and share it with the steering committee for, yeah. Okay, and to the extent there are any concerns raised, we could call a meeting to discuss them before going in. I think part of that we'll have to come into an agreement with the legislature about cadence, in that they tend to call and expect to see you in short order. But that's all. I think that's all right in this particular instance, and would be a reflection of the need to be able to ensure that the council is comfortable with any testimony that would be provided.
Chris?
Yeah, what I just put in the chat was, with other councils, commissions, other things, oftentimes if we know, if we've got time, the steering committee could say, for this instance, let's have these three people go and represent, or, speak on behalf of the, if they want multiple people as opposed to one. But I would imagine that the chair, doesn't need any such permission, right? The chair, so if the secretary is chair, the designated chair, there's no, that the chair would reasonably represent the council, I would think.
Yeah, but I guess I echo Jared's, thoughts that we would not really want to be taking a position on behalf of the council in a role as chair of the council, or as in a role as the steering committee for the council, unless it is something that the council has actually taken a position on. So right. I think then to what Julie's getting at is, yes, the, let's, one thing I've seen from experiences like the chair of the Natural Resources Board, who has the staff and is basically, the executive face of that board, goes in and testifies, but typically has the, the board's backing on the testimony if it's on a substantive issue or a position. So I would not, necessarily feel comfortable going in there as chair and saying, oh yeah, the council's position is X, without knowing that's the council's position. But in my role as Secretary of Administration, serving on the council, and I can't imagine that I'd have much to offer in any way in my testimony on positions. I'm not an expert, and my role here is really to try to keep this moving and get an end product in a rational and thoughtful and way. So, I guess that's a long way of saying I wouldn't foresee my going in there on behalf of the council on any substantive issue without council or the steering committee at least knowing what that would be and agreeing to it. But again, I guess it's going to depend on the question, Chris, and what we're all comfortable. We may go in and say, right now we have no position. We're still working on it. Or Lauren?
Oh, I think Liz was first.
Okay, Liz.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking, given when the legislative session will likely conclude for the year, you're right. We may not have any formal decisions of the council, so that may take care of part of the concern. But I bet that if the House were to request testimony, one of the House appointees would be willing to appear with you And if the Senate were to request testimony, one of the Senate appointees would be willing to appear with you. And doing it that way might be satisfactory both for the legislature and for you and the administration. So that's, and maybe Jane would be able to, I assume requests will probably come into Jane. So hopefully that would manage it.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I think we would want, you know, Julie and I would probably want the same flexibility of, yeah, so depending on the topic and the day and the time and the capacity to kind of tag team that as well with a member or two, however you all want to do it. So, okay. Well, I guess what we just need to do is make sure that any requests for information about the council go through Jane, and she can let us as a steering committee know, and we can decide who, probably relatively quickly, who can go in. But if we need to have a meeting, we'll just have to tell the committee clerk that we need time, because we are a large council that needs to get together on some topics.
At least on my behalf, if it's a scheduling issue, you know, I think the steering committee could say we are good with the idea of Jane helping to schedule those things and reach out to House or Senate members to go with you as needed.
Yeah.
And if that framework helped move things along, at least for me, that would be fine. I don't know if others agree. Yep, it looks like.
With that, Lauren, Jared, you okay with that, Jared?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
I think I'm having a connection issue. Hopefully you can hear me.
Julie.
That sounds good.
Yeah, we'll make sure we're as fast and transparent as we can be under the circumstances. But you know, I never hesitate to, you know, let a committee chair or a committee clerk know, you know, you've just 45 minutes is not enough time, and we'll let you know when we can be there with the right
Sure.
people. So. I guess that's all on that. Is there anything else you want to talk about on that particular topic? Okay. The final thing is, you know, again, just wrapping around more as next steps, open government considerations, and whether we want to put anything on the agenda for March 22. I know we're going to have a steering committee meeting, I believe, on the 17th now, or the 18th, which is our next regular meeting. And we could talk about the agenda more then, but in the interest of, you know, getting any materials of other items together for that agenda, I think what we've determined is we're going to ask all of the subcommittee members and new council members, new subcommittee members to review the videos, meet with council if available during a subcommittee meeting. And do we want to put an agenda item on, or we want now for the 22nd, or we want to wait and see how that goes and talk about it on the 17th?
I think we can wait and see now, but I do think that depending on how those conversations go, it might be nice to just have a 15-minute time slot for like moments of enlightenment or anything that really should be shared cross subcommittee from those conversations.
Okay.
I guess
All right.
One
Great.
question I have is I'm just looking at the calendar because I think our next full council meeting is on Monday, March 22nd, and then our next steering committee meeting is on Thursday, March 18th. And I'm just thinking if there are any agenda items that we're anticipating for that March 22nd meeting that would require more preparation, either of subcommittees or of folks we would invite, it might be helpful to surface those and just find, you know, before the 18th, just 'cause it's such a tight turnaround. And it seems like we've got a big gap here between our steering committee meetings. So I'm trying to figure out on the fly ways to handle. I wonder if it's like, if we each as steering committee members and subcommittee members basically have a point of contact. Maybe Jane, you are so popular, you keep coming up in every discussion, that like if we come up with a topic or possibility for an agenda idea, you know, over the next week, we share that with Jane and then we kind of share a draft agenda. That feels to me, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, or others, on the logistical side of organizing our meetings. And if it feels like there's something emerging that we'd want to give someone more of a heads up to prepare for, we'll have the chance to identify that before the 18th.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any real agenda formed in my mind, and I don't know if others do. I would see, the wrap up of the open government considerations and how that's going, updates from the subcommittees. And Chris, you have your hand up. Maybe you had some other ideas.
Just having living, because I live this every day, and have having new commissioners and others come on. I think the one area we might want to reinforce or explain in plain English is, and this may already be done, the existing FAQs, I need to go back and look, but is specifically conversations via email. I think for those who aren't in the public arena, that's not necessarily intuitive about that constituting a conversation and not replying to all, certainly going to email individuals back and forth, but that may be, because I just know after we had that first meeting of ours, that was where a lot of confusion first kind of arose, was about those email conversations. And so I'm just thinking that it'd be beneficial for there to be a supplemental discussion within the subcommittees, or a supplemental something from Jane or from, again, I'd have to go back and look at the FAQ, maybe there's something that Matt's already provided that we should just highlight to explain the whole email thing, but that's not as intuitive as an actual, Zoom meeting or physical meeting. So that may just be something we want to put a little more effort into explaining why that constitutes, and then what you can legitimately communicate via email, like scheduling or following up on a procedural matter that you've already voted on in the subcommittee or something like that. How to comment on drafts, like individually to Jane or a subcommittee member or something, just as kind of practical things, because that's not as intuitive as the other stuff.
So just,
I don't know if Lauren's hand was up or from last time. Okay, Jared.
Oh no, I think I was the most recent, so I'll go to the back of the line.
I think you're up next. Oh,
I think it's Jane and Matt.
Okay.
Matt may be in response, and Jane's been up for a while.
Okay. Jane?
Matt, did you want to respond to Chris first, though? Because I was going to go a different way for a minute.
Well, just so the steering committee knows, we should have a memo. I'm not sure how much enlightenment it will provide, that we're doing some multi-state research on asynchronous communications and what other states are finding with their open meetings law. With, if I email Secretary Young and she emails Chris, and who then emails someone else, is that an open meeting or not? So we're in the midst of finalizing that now, and we hope to have it before the March 22 meeting.
That's great.
Great.
And I guess I just, for me, what I was just going to reference is I thought with respect to this steering committee and this point on our current agenda was around thinking about the agenda for the 22nd and how we want to incorporate the open meeting law into that agenda. So conversations around that, but I'll just highlight that at the last meeting in February, and what subcommittees are working on now are the recognition that the bulk of that meeting in March will be around subcommittee charges, work plans, and then particular focus on the phase that we want to be at right after that meeting and moving forward with the RFPs for technical analyses. And so a conversation about the technical components needed and for the contracting work to move forward. So that feels like a lot of the substance of the March meeting. And then what we're trying to, I thought, get at right now is sort of picking around some other agenda topics related to sort of bringing everybody up to speed with the open meeting law. So thanks.
That's helpful. Thanks, Jane. Anybody else on the next agenda? We hear you, Jared. I know that if we call upon your subcommittee to do something for the meeting, you don't want to spend your weekend on it, because that's the timing that we have now with Thursday steering committees. But
yeah, I would just offer that I really like what Jane laid out for kind of the substance of that meeting. I do think that it could also be helpful. I've heard reference, I think, that both Jane and Peter have made in subcommittee meetings to kind of an overall like Gantt chart and timeline for how all of the subcommittee work adds up into the kind of broader timeline of working towards the climate action plan. And it might be helpful, in addition to each subcommittee kind of providing an update on its work plan and its charges, to be able to come up for air together to have that bigger picture overview. I think that would be great, and totally agree on the updates and the kind of getting clarity on both the timeline and process around the RFPs, and kind of, the expectations or opportunities around review from certain subcommittees that might have interest or expertise that would be helpful in terms of assessing those.
All right, I think we've got a good piece of work done today. Anything else? Lauren, your hand is up, but I don't.
Oh, sorry, Secretary. I was just letting Jane know that she was muted because it looked like she was trying to say something.
I was
going to tee me up.
totally agreeing with you, Jared, on the summation up to the total. So
I also will totally agree with both Jane and Jared's approach. I don't know, Jane, if you said this, but I'm just going to say it in case it wasn't, that I do think there needs to be a formal agenda item to approve the draft process roadmap, which we haven't really discussed as a steering committee or a full council. And that's kind of feels like something that is very process specific, but we should probably get it checked off as we begin to work as subcommittee levels. And then because Chris left, and I'm sure he would say this, just again, figuring out the final decision on which digital platform we'll be using moving forward, or if we're able to use multiple, or what that looks like.
Okay, well, thank you all. If there's nothing else, we can open this up to public comment. We have, I believe, some members of the public here. So Melissa, do you want to, we'll ask those who would like to comment to raise their hands, and I guess Melissa's still there. We can have her call on them.
Yep. So far, I don't see any hands raised. If there's any members from the public, you're welcome to just speak up if you'd like. Unmute your microphone by using the icon, or *6 if you're on the phone. I don't see or hear any.
Okay, so Jared, did you have something more? Oh, we have someone, I think, who's raised his hand.
Correct. Yeah, go ahead, Steve Crowley, please.
Hi, thanks. I have been following a number of the subcommittees and the steering committee meetings, and just a couple of quick things that I'd like to request. One is it would be great to see the recordings updated because there's a lot of people who can't make these regular times would really depend on that, and I know there's a lot of interest, but that would be a great thing to fix. And the other is a question generally about communication from the public to you all, to the council, and I wonder if there could be a well-identified pathway for that, including, public comments to a legislative committee are all posted the same day, and that would be really helpful, I think, as an ongoing. I do have a concern that if you just wait until June to go out and get public comment and stakeholder engagement and all that, you're going to miss important opportunities, and it will no longer be possible to roll ideas in at that point. So the sooner the better. And if there's a good way to do that, that's efficient and works for everybody, it would be great. That's all. Thank you.
Just a very quick response to let you know, Steve, that Melissa and I are working very hard to figure out the answers to both those. The videos will be updated. If they're not all updated by today, they will be in the next day or so. And we're working on considerations for how to more adeptly take in public comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary, you're muted, but it looks like Jared has his hand raised. I don't see anybody else from the public.
Do you have anything, you have something to add?
Yeah, well, first, just to thank Steve. And also, I wanted to just try to tie up the loose end on the suggestion that Lauren made that I thought was great around an agenda item for adopting the draft process roadmap. I think before we go ahead and do that, it would be good for the council to receive. I know that there have been different versions, and I don't know which one is the latest version, but if it could be sent out, the latest draft sent to the council with a deadline for any kind of comments or suggested revisions to be received, so that a final could be kind of approved by the steering committee on the 18th, and then voted on by or I should say adopted by consensus by the council on the 22nd. But I just want to make sure we're building in that time frame to give folks who haven't seen it or haven't seen the most recent draft to look at that and make sure that we're all comfortable with that, and we've gotten any feedback that should be incorporated before we're actually asking people to adopt it.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, it seems like first the subcommittees are working on them, they're finalizing them, then they're going to bring them up to the steering committee, correct? That's the plan. Okay.
But I was, apologies, Secretary Young, I was also thinking about the other components of that process roadmap that don't deal with the subcommittees, that are like about our decision-making process as a council and as a steering committee. There were some other components that I think also would benefit from a final kind of look and approval from anybody who's interested.
Okay.
Yeah, good points.
All right. Jane, try to operationalize that. Anything else? Well, again, thanks for making time in your day on short notice. I really appreciate this time we've spent on some of these really important issues. Like I said, we don't want to get distracted, and it can be, some public records requests and the like can be a very big distraction and resource intensive. So the more we can do to keep everybody within the guardrails, the better. We have an obligation to do that, but it's also, really important to the work of the council. So thank you. And enjoy the rest of your town meeting week. If there's nothing else, consider the meeting adjourned.
Great. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.